All right, practice problem 3.7. We have millimeters, grams, and seconds. Part origin is located at the lower left corner and at the back of the part. Lines, circles, center lines, rectangles, sketch patterns, extruded boss with the radiuses. We will either do those as sketch fillets, but I still kind of lean towards feature fillets just to make those a little easier. On my hierarchy list, chamfers and fillets are a little bit lower on the list. So let's move this out of the way. No crazy dimensions. We have the spacing, 45, 45, 40 on our dimensions. So let's get into our metric. On the front plane, open up a sketch, go into our rectangle. We're always going to connect our first piece of geometry or a piece of geometry to the origin. We can go back in and right click to the smart dimension, and then we're 260. And with the scaling on, we'll see that little bit of flicker. The first dimension scales the part, so if it's really small and we put a really big number on it, it doesn't jump, zoom in or zoom out accordingly. For the vertical dimension, we have 180. And let's see, for this, let's go ahead and extrude this. And our distance is 10. All right, and then we'll go back with the sketch. And before, this gives us the opportunity to then decide if we want to use the linear sketch pattern, if we want to use a linear feature pattern, if we want to do a sketch-driven pattern. We have those options to work with. So let's do the sketch-driven pattern, but there are good reasons to not include everything in the first sketch. So our diameter is 25, and the vertical location from the bottom edge is 45. And then from the edge is 40, but it's off of the other side. So let's go ahead and stay consistent with that just in case the numbers don't exactly line up. So we go to 40. So without sitting down and doing the math, the 60 typical 180 plus 80 should give us the 260, so it wouldn't have mattered. But to help keep track of things, putting it in the best orientation or making good decisions on the orientation, especially when reproducing these parts, try to stay as close to the drawing as you can. All right, so I see the first one is going to the right. We want to reverse the direction. And then we're going to have a total of 4 items. Okay, so that gives us our first. I would like to dimension the X spacing. That's going to give us a center line and a dimension between those first 2 circles. And then we have 3. As soon as it moves from one row to multiples, then we're going to be able to see the preview for those circles. All right, so the vertical dimensioning is 45, and we'll go ahead and accept. All right, so pretty good. I can see from this, if I grab the endpoint, the only thing that didn't get assigned was the vertical to the center line. That gives us our fully defined geometry. So if I hadn't included the dimensions and said dimension for the spacing, then I would have had to do an orientation by picking the center points and saying horizontal, center point, vertical, and then applying the dimensions manually. So that dimension X spacing, dimension Y spacing is a little bit of a time saver. And then we're going to extrude cut and go up to next or through all, whichever one you've picked. We'll go with the first corner and we're looking at the fillet. And our fillet was radius of 15. And I want to select the others. So we pick that corner and make sure that the opposite two corners are highlighting. And then because the mouse is showing up with a little check mark on the right button, I can go ahead and hit the right button. And that will complete the command. All right, so our volume then, going into evaluate and mass properties, we have 407, 164. So that is our numbers, so did pretty good there.